Chapter 8. It took me a month to even create sparks. The amount of focus and energy it required to conjure and then harness the lightning in the blades was incomparable to anything I had ever done. The sensation was new, too. It felt as though I was telepathically asking the electrons to move in specific ways, and sometimes a few of them complied. Like most goals, the key here was confidence. If I expected sparks, sparks would come. If I expected an entire bolt, a bolt would come. It also helped to keep the blades warm and give them a bit of a static charge with a soft cloth to get them started. It got easier after every day of practice, until I was incinerating scarecrows and overloading sandbags without issue. The gilded bolt is a beautiful thing. Unlike ordinary lightning, these fulgurations hold their shape for several seconds, glowing with a soft golden light and emanating absurd amounts of heat. When wielded correctly, they do not branch off so much. Instead, the individual strands of electricity wrap around themselves, forming a white-hot rope of death itself. While my wrath burned much hotter, I preferred the control of the bolt to the brutish raw power of its emotional alternative. Focus was much more sustainable and reliable than hatred and anger, though I would not forget that my ability to use both is what made me particularly valuable to Mynah. When my mental capacity for sorcery ran low, I let my mind rest and trained my body. I had Federation soldiers use spears, the Gilded sorcerer's weapon of choice, in all spars. None of them were able to overcome my employment of both George and my father's sword-fighting techniques, even in 3-to-1 matchups. After 2 months, my ability to burn, slash, and duel opponents with the new blades was finally ready for the Western sorcerers. My unit was an amalgamation of the greatest warriors in the Federation. From Galalarage to Northtrue, I collected our finest. Refined armor, swords, and new shields intended to deflect gilded bolts were issued to each of them. Since our only targets were a few men and their boar, no artillery was commissioned. I wanted to kill them myself anyway. Federation intelligence ensured the secrecy of the operation, forcing me to evade Autumn at every opportunity. Captain Predator organized for us to stay at the nearby Galalarage Federation facility, where I was given my official office as a cover-up. Through it all, the quaint little town remained oblivious to the carnage that awaited its mountains. Once night had come, we began the ascent. One by one, my men scaled the steep cliffs, crossing flimsy rope bridges and dangling from crude old ladders. It felt like a labyrinth designed perfectly so that only a sorcerer born and raised on those mountains could successfully navigate it. Luckily, my guidance was enough to lead us all to the first peak with only a single casualty. Up there, the air was thin enough that every action required focus. Even something as simple as breathing or blinking ice out of one's eye. My thick plating kept me comfortable enough, but I was so focused I could feel every snowflake that landed against my armor, and every bit of frost that formed on its surface. By the time the last of them had made it to a snowy plateau, the real mission began. The Gilded sorcerers seemed obsessed with the number 3. There were 3 races in Hanyem: the humans, Felabrano, and Gisharin. Each sect of sorcerers had one of each race. Each descended from one of the original sorcerers. A Gilder, an Audex, and an Acree, respectively. Predictably, there were 3 sects of sorcerers as well. In the north, just south of Gishar's capital. In the southeast, just north of Felibron. And here in the west. Even their emblem was a triangle. I found it ironic how they promote the idea that Hanyem is the byproduct of these 3 identities, claim to be nonpartisan, and advocate for peace. Yet they now oppose the unity of the Indigalo Federation. At one point I would have seen them as well-intentioned but ignorant. Now I am smarter. Now I understand that they are a threat to the survival of Hanyem that must be contained.
I apologize for any confusion, but this is restricted land,
announced an unfamiliar voice.
Centuries-old treaties forbid Federation presence on these mountains.
I turned swiftly, thrashing my cape violently behind me. On a separate plateau, separated only by a rickety rope bridge, stood a small Gisharan man. His purple skin was wrinkled and scarred, and his pointy ears drooped tiredly at the sides of his head. Despite that, the wind of the cliffs pushed his cloak against his body, revealing the outline of concealed armor and dense muscles. To his left stood a gilded boar. Before this moment, I had never seen the legendary beast in person. It was larger than I could have imagined, with thick, shaggy fur draped across its bulky body, dark eyes and shimmering gold tusks. They jutted out of the animal's firm snout like metal spires, curving out menacingly. The most valuable thing in Hanyem, and it was being wasted on the body of a brutish animal. That was once true, I coughed. But I possess a warrant from the king himself for the arrest of Leo Gilder, Tacit Audix, and Jude Acree. I presume you to be the latter of the 3, yes?
We have no interest in appearing in one of your Empire's sham trials, Aurum,
shouted yet another new voice from deeper in the woods. This time what emerged was a human man, shamelessly adorned in gilded armor and layers of dark brown fabric. Painted on his face was golden war paint, decorating the small portion of his face spared by his thick beard. A mess of dark hair nearly hid his eyes, revealing its full extent after a gust of wind brushed his hood down. Accompanying him were 2 more gilded boar, stepping up with him as he took his place at Jude Acree's side. His face was clearly just as old as Jude's, but his expression was not as tired. This man, Leo Gilder, was enraged by our very presence.
I can feel the charge of gilded ivory emanating from your sheath,
Leo announced.
So I take it you are the one who killed Zebulon.
I nodded and responded. Impressive sorcery, and even more impressive deduction, Leo Gilder.
More importantly,
he added,
I know who and what you are, Zed Aurum.
Captain Zed Aurum, I corrected.
Right,
he sighed.
I know you are a weapon disguising yourself as a man. I know that the only way to spare my people from Mynah's planned genocide is to kill you and all who follow you. And I know it will not be easy, if even possible.
Then let us not waste any more time, I requested.
As you wish,
agreed Jude, drawing up 3 golden spears from beneath the powdery snow. He passed 2 of them to Leo, and it had begun. Leo rushed across the weak bridge the instant combat was promised. He kept one spear strapped to his back, and held the other out in front of him, ready to puncture through any obstacle Hanyam could offer. Prepared for his hastiness, I drew my new gilded blades, aimed their tips towards the planks before him, and unleashed an amateur bolt. Despite my inexperience, the force of the lightning was enough to cripple the structure, splintering and exploding the rope and wood into millions of crisp pieces. Anticipating this, Leo leapt forward before the energy had even left my swords, emerging from the smoke at inexplicable speeds a moment later. For a split second, I could see his feral expression through the slits of my mask. And then I was on the ground, with a burning sensation in my chest. I had entered combat with an angry and vicious animal. Disoriented by the experience of battling beyond my league, I scrambled to grab my weapons and return to my feet. By the time my eyes had regained their grasp on Leo, he was already tearing through my men. I watched as he threw himself at a corporal, skewering her and the soldier behind her faster than I could comprehend. With his spear already through both of their chests, he sent a gilded bolt toward another, frying him on the spot. His charred corpse fell onto another, disgustingly immobilizing him. Indigalo is a strong metal, but it is no match against lightning, nor gilded weaponry. Additionally, the shields we had developed specifically for this mission did nothing but conduct enemy attacks into the bodies of their users. Both of his offensive options had proven able to cut through Federation troops like a hot knife through butter. To draw up his weapon once more, he placed his boot on the hip of my now deceased corporal, and reversed his spear out with such momentum that the recoil decapitated another soldier on his opposite side. His strength and coordination frightened me, but I managed to calm my stomach and prepare to intervene. Charging toward him, I angled my swords above me, ready to slash both of his arms off in an instant, as another squad of my men distracted him like cannon fodder. Unfortunately, as I entered the range to claim my necessary victory, a blunt force struck my shin, tripping me and sending my face into the snow. Quickly, I flipped onto my back and sat up, only to see a herd of gilded boars standing angrily before me. They scraped their stiff hooves against the snow, preparing to charge and trample me further. My frustration was enough to ignore the pain as I lunged to my feet and began the slaughter. I swung and slashed passionately at the mass of pigs in front of me. The composition of their bodies made this extraordinarily difficult, slowing me down considerably even after killing only a single boar. By the time my blades met the flesh of the second, I was already exhausted. The wounded boar, comprehending my moment of weakness, freed itself from my blades and limped off behind the front lines as its peers thrust their sharp tusks into my legs. They made quick work of my boots and lower armor, scraping and crumpling the comparatively weak plating into a bloody mess of scrap. What remained was devoid of any integrity or protective capability. Kicking them off was futile, forcing me to attempt an equally impossible escape. Thankfully, I was not alone, as a sheet of arrows descended upon the savage creatures. This euthanized the majority of them instantly. For the first time on this mission, my men finally did something useful. Nodding with gratitude, I shook off some useless bits of my destroyed armor and turned my sights to the survivors. Exterminating the fleeing boar proved to be much simpler, as I was able to drop nearly the entire group in a matter of seconds. Just as I raised my blades to finish the final straggler, a strange glow shone to my right. I turned to react, but it was far too late. The bolt shot through my system, beaming itself into my chest and dissipating throughout my body. My chest plate overheated and crackled with the overwhelming current. For me, it felt like my heart had blinked, resulting in a debilitating lapse of consciousness. Once my vision returned, I could barely make out the short figure of Jude Acree standing before me, with his arm and spear outstretched threateningly. "Finally, you chose to join!" I choked in an effort to distract myself from the burn of both the entry wounds on my chest and exit wounds on my back.
"I will not stand to see harm done to such sacred animals,"
he wheezed, clearly exhausted from his bolt. "True," I whispered with a smile before swinging both blades together toward him. His reflexes were fast enough to block the hit with his spear, but his small body and poor fighting stance caused him to tumble backward on impact. Rolling through the snow evasively, he dodged several of my following attacks before eventually bringing up his spear to block once again. This was a mistake, as I had predicted this exact repetition, and only used one sword. To counteract the pressure of my swing, he had to support his polearm with both hands, leaving him completely unprotected against my second blade. Before he had time to react, I swept my second sword through both of his forearms without resistance. His dismembered hands and weapon plopped onto the snow as I moved what remained of my boot onto his chest. Blood squirted out from the two stumps at the ends of his arms. Preparing to finish the job, I brought both of my swords to his neck, like a pair of golden shears. With my newly acquired leverage, I craned my head around to see Leo, incinerating another one of my poor soldiers. "That is enough, Leo!" I shouted, catching his attention. "Or prepare to try this fight alone." Leo's eyes widened with terror, as his strength visibly left his body.
"Jude!"
"Leo,"
called Jude.
"I cannot let you risk this. I am sorry."
In a grotesque turn of events, Jude closed his eyes and thrust his neck into my blades, killing himself slowly and painfully. His blood poured out into the snow like water from a broken hose. It probably took a minute for the light to leave his eyes entirely. I turned back to Leo, unsure what to even say. By the time I did, he was already running at me and shouting with both spears in hand. "Troops, finish off the herd," I commanded quickly. "I will handle him." As the last word exited my lips, Leo was already in my face. It took both of my swords together to withstand the force of one of his spears, which, as karma would have it, allowed him to swing the other into my helmet. The plating around my skull was thick enough to protect me from any direct trauma, but the blow was still felt brutally. In my dizziness, Leo took the opportunity to knee me in the crotch, before shoving me backward. I managed to stay on my feet, stepping back to delay the next hit and buy time to fix my stance.
"You sick animal,"
he accused.
"When I first heard about you four, I felt sorry. But after seeing this, it is all clear to me. I could not care how much pressure they placed on you. I do not care what they did to you."
He raised one spear and threw it like a javelin. It took all the focus and energy in my body to deflect it with a powerful swing. The projectile spear clattered against a rock beneath us. The sound echoed through the mountain uniquely.
"It takes a truly rotten soul to turn into a monster of your caliber, Aurum."
I swung weakly at him, but he easily dodged me. I swung again, and he parried. The reaction force stunned me for a second as he raised his spear once more to conjure a final gilded bolt. This time, it was massive, erupting from his spear in a golden glow, visible from the other side of Hanyem. Nearly blinded, I raised my swords into a cross in front of me, and buried my feet in the snow. I could feel the heat burning my skin from a distance as it attempted to push past my gilded shield. Half of my mask was torn off, exposing one side of my face to the intense heat. I could feel my arms beginning to buckle as blood dripped down my chin to the snow like a ticking clock. The snow around us melted into a wet slush from all the energy. After what felt like a century, the bolt eventually dissipated into my swords. I had successfully captured it. In terror, he jumped out of the way, but it was pointless. The returning bolt was nearly as large, burning through the air as it made its way to Leo's chest. The force was great enough to fling him into a nearby cliff. The sound of his body hitting the solid rock was particularly memorable. The impact sent a shockwave through the mountain, nearly causing an avalanche. A pile of snow dumped itself onto the injured sorcerer as he struggled to pull himself up.
Root! Leaf!
He shouted from beneath the snow helplessly. 2 more boar appeared from the snow, clamping their powerful jaws down onto my thigh and forearm. Sick of this repetitive tactic, I impaled them both, flinging their limp corpses down the side of the mountain with little resistance. I could hear the pigs hit the ground with a resonating thud a couple of seconds later. The sound was satisfying. If 2 sorcerers could not stop me, nothing could. I limped over to where Leo lay, collapsing to my knees over him. "Look around!" I commanded, grabbing his chin and pointing it toward the battlefield. Dozens of Federation soldiers and gilded boar were scattered lifelessly across the plateau. A few of my men were still fighting, cornering boar to gut them or executing them at point-blank range with crossbows. Regardless, the result was clearly decided.
As if surrender could ever yield a different result,
spat Leo, gargling blood.
Kill me, and everything gets one hell of a lot worse for you feds.
"One last chance to fix this," I growled. "Where is Tacit Audix? Tell me, and I might even let the 2 of you share a cell." Leo smiled and shook his head. His teeth were more red than white.
Tacit had nothing to do with this. He's free. He made it out.
I had not expected compliance, but the lack of it still frustrated me. I raised my armored fist and swiftly brought it down into his jaw. Some blood splattered against my face and armor, but what looked like a pint shot out onto the icy rock behind him. "Tell me! Tell me so nobody else has to die ever again!" He kept smiling. I punched again, still smiling. By this point, I was fuming. "How are you this stupid? Your people have died because of you! All you had to do was play along. All you had to do was not get in our way. You did this. You gave him that armor. You stopped me from saving Nick. This is all your fault. You're so goddamn ignorant that you would rather let everyone you love die than live in a unified Hanyem. How do you not see how stupid that is? All I want is peace. How can you worship Mynah but reject his law? You killed all of them. How could you? Look at my chest, Leo. What is this symbol? Is it the symbol of humanity? Of tyranny? No! You imbecile! It is of a unified Hanyem. It is a place of peace that I see every night in every dream. It is a beautiful image only possible with the combined efforts of every soul in Hanyem. Yet you splinter our peace into factions and violence. What the hell? I must have punched him 20 times while I was shouting, because by the time I had paused to breathe, his skull had caved in. My gauntlet was damp and warm. In this cold, it was almost refreshing. The bits of bone, torn skin, and gallons of blood pouring from what was once his eye sockets and nostrils were less refreshing, visually. I stood up, shook off all the blood I could, and turned around to face my men. 3 remained, with 10 limbs total. Just like the rest of the mountain, they were covered in blood. I took a deep breath and prepared to give them orders. Instead, I vomited everywhere. Half of it, covered by my mask, curved upward into my face like a revolting tidal wave. It stung my eye and filled my nose. The other half plopped into the snow, adding another color to the mix in the form of a bright and bloody orange. After another deep breath, actual words came out. "Collect everything. It is all valuable to us. I will clear out the rest." They nodded and scurried off, clearly too tired and afraid to question anything that they had just witnessed. After about 10 minutes of climbing 1 flight of stone stairs, I waddled my way into the main temple. On the outside it appeared to be just a cave, but on the inside it was an ornate and historic structure. Despite its age, it had clearly been well cared for, as it was spotless. I could not have cared less about any of this. A few boar had clearly made their way back here, bleeding out and dying of battle wounds in the comfort of their old home. Their fresh corpses lined each room, eliminating all of the intended serenity of a place like this. Once I had cleared the 3 rooms and the main hall, I stumbled my way into the 4th, but this one was different. Inside was a bed and other regular adornments, but in the northern wall there was a small tunnel. By the look of it, it was tall and wide enough for a person to escape through. The very possibility of such a thing frustrated me to my core. Angrily, I leaned down and peered into it. Just as I had feared, the tunnel was long and dark. Prepared to follow it, I ducked my head and stepped inside. But then, I saw something. Standing right in front of me was a small piglet. Its snout was small, and it barely even had a tail. It was even young enough to still have some pink on its snout, and its tusks were barely coming in. I drew one of my long swords once more to put it down, but then it looked at me. For whatever reason, I will never forget the way it looked at me. Obviously, it was sad, and it knew what I had inflicted upon its kind that day. But its expression said something different than I had anticipated. Gilded boar are the 4th most intelligent species in Hanyem, just behind humans, Gisharin, and Felabrano. Sorcerers claim they are capable of their own sort of speech and complex thinking. So this boar should have looked at me with eyes of vengeance. It should have tried to kill me with what little strength it had. It should have, at the very least, hated me. Instead, it had Nick's eyes. It looked at me like I had disappointed it. It looked at me as if it had great expectations for me and I failed to deliver on them. It looked at me as if I was pretending to be someone, and it did not like who that was. It was so strange. Then I remembered half of my mask was gone. It could see me, not just my mask of body. It could see me. For the first time in months, I was making eye contact with something. I felt so vulnerable. I felt uniquely terrified. I felt almost ashamed. I could not let this wicked little creature escape. Whatever psychic torment it had inflicted upon me had to end. I pointed my swords at it, connecting their tips. Weak sparks sputtered from where they met. Seeing what was happening, the little vermin bowed its head and bounded down the tunnel, away from me. I refocused, but instead of golden sparks, purple plasma erupted from me. Wrath burned out from my skin, wrapping around my sword and down the dark tunnel, colliding with the rock. It exploded out in front of me, flinging my whole body backward into the wall. My head, now practically unarmored, swung back against the icy brick. I was knocked out cold. By the time I woke up, Federation medics knelt by my side, shooting sweet Furanite into my arm and checking my vitals. I did not speak to them. I did not look at them. I just stared forward at the collapsed tunnel behind me and wished a long and painful death for that little hoglet.